So we're on Vav and Aleph on Chagigah, in the middle of the page, and we've left this long piece of Agadata, and now we're actually going to get back into Chagigah. And to make this work, I just want to give out one handout that you got already, and just go over the different karbanos, and then give you another handout. Those are some sukkim that will come up. Okay? So when's the last time I gave you this handout out?
Yeah.
Okay? Don't have it, do have it. Now you have it.
You have a copy?
Yeah, plenty of copies. Okay.
What are the handouts?
There you go.
Oh yes, I read this at the beginning.
Yes, this is the right, correct.
Festival office.
Right, this is the introduction to the art scroll taken by my handy dandy iPhone. That's why it looks like that. And what's important here is there are three karbanos. There are three karbanos that are brought when the pilgrim comes to the Beis Hamikdash. The first two are primary, and that's going to be a discussion of the Gemara. One is the Olas Riyah, and one is the Shalmei Chagigah. Sometimes the Gemara will talk about Olah and Shlamim, right? So the Olah is first the Olas Riyah. When you come to the Beis Hamikdash, you had an obligation to bring a karban. It's not just simply enough to come by yourself. You have to bring a karban with you, the Olas Riyah, which was burnt completely. Olah means it goes up. Like Elal, goes up all the way, completely consumed on the Mizbeach. Then you had Shalmei Chagigah. Shlamim comes from the same root as Shalom. It's a peace offering in honor of the Yontif. It's called Shalmei Chagigah, or it's called sometimes just Chagigah, which is the topic, the name of our Masechta. And that the Shlamim are eaten. They're eaten by the owner, by his family and his guests. And there are certain parts that are given to the Kohen that the Kohen is going to get. But it's also derived from certain psukim. This is the introduction to the art scroll, and that's the Shalmei Chagigah. So the Gemara's discussion is going to focus on Olas Riyah, Shalmei Chagigah, which is more. Which, if you are going to divide your lot, which one gets more? What's the minimum? Which one has a smaller minimum? Which one has a larger minimum amount value? And then there's a third carbon, which we're not really going to talk about, Shalmei Simcha. And that is that every day of Yom Tov you're supposed to be Mesameach. And how do you be Mesameach? Of course, guys eat meat, right? Steak and liquor. Well, we don't have liquor here. So steak at least. So therefore, every day that you come to the Beis Hamikdash, you would bring a Shalmei Simcha, read from the Shalmei Simcha. Okay? And that's a third carbon, which is included, but it's not really going to be a topic of discussion, does not have any minimum amount. So that's the first thing. Also having one thing, I'm going to give it now so I can explain it because it's going to come up in this Gemara, and the Gemara doesn't really bring the pasuk in clearness. Okay, this is from the end of Parshas Mishpatim. There's one pasuk. There are two sides, obviously, but one pasuk that is bolded up is the pasuk the Gemara is going to refer to. This is right before Har Sinai. It looks a little bit like it's after Har Sinai because it comes in the end of Shmos. Parshas Yisro is the theophany at Har Sinai, the Ten Commandments, and Parshas Mishpatim is really a list of a lot of interpersonal laws, some ritual laws, and then at the very end we have a whole chapter, this last chapter in Parshas Mishpatim, that talks about what is happening to Moshe going up, and he's going to leave behind the people. So this, according to Chazal, even though it's written after Yisro, occurs before. Okay, so this, and if you just look at some of the psukim, right, in Pasuk Dalar, Vayechtov Moshe called the Hashem, Vayashkim Baboker, even Mizbeach Tachzara, V'shtei Masrei Matzev, V'shtei Masar Shetei Yisrael, he builds altars, and Vayishlach es Nari B'nei Yisrael, V'yalu Olos, he sends the young men who bring Olot, burnt offerings, Vayizbechu Zvachim Shlamim, they're bringing Shlamim, L'Hashem Parim. Okay, so there are Zvachim, there are Olos, and there are Shlamim brought here. And the Gemara is going to entertain a discussion whether these are comparable to the Olas Riyah and the Shalmei Chagigah. Okay, now it's not exactly the same thing. It is a pilgrimage festival because the Torah was given on which pilgrimage festival? Shavuos. Supposedly. Well, in the eyes of Chazal, yes. Okay. In the eyes of what the premise of this Gemara is to make the equation is that otherwise it would make no sense to call this the equivalent of the Shalmei Chagigah.
But it wasn't, right? It was one day off or something.
Whatever, okay? It's close enough, okay? And more importantly, it's before Matan Torah. Or it's at Matan Torah. And a lot of things haven't been really taught yet. So what are they? So are they both equal? Is one the Ola equivalent to Olas Ria? Is the Shlamim equivalent to Shalmei Chagigah? Or is one, or is the other, or none of the above? So that's going to be the Gemara's discussion. I only mention it because you'll see it's going to refer to this pasuk. It's oblique. It's important that you understand this is at Matan Torah or before Matan Torah in the eyes of Chazal. This is taken, even though when you read it, it looks like Moshe is giving this right after Matan Torah, where the people say Nasiv and Nishma. You're really saying Nasiv and Nishma for what the Almighty is going to give to us. Right? Whatever Moshe teaches them, the Mishpatim may be Mishpatim that they had learned before. It's not really the entire Torah. So this is not a sacrifice. This is not a celebration after Matan Torah. And you know why it's not after Matan Torah, because after Matan Torah, what happens? Moshe is on Har Sinai, right? He comes down 40 days later. They're worshiping the golden calf. Worship the golden calf. It comes down. Everything unravels. Then Moshe goes back up again. So it would make no sense that this could be taking place right after Moshe got the Torah, or right after they heard the Torah. It's actually at the time. It may be at the time of Matan Torah, which is before Moshe comes down with the Luchos, or right before. But the equivalent is going to be made there, and the you'll see how the Gemara develops this. But it's important that you remember this is the pasuk the Gemara is talking about. It has nothing to do with going to Yerushalayim. It has nothing, but it does relate to at least one of the pilgrimage festivals, which I believe is the undercurrent of why the Gemara is going to use this as perhaps a source. Okay, so hold on to that sheet, and we'll come to it towards the bottom of the Amud. So Beit Shammai, we're back on Vav and Aleph. Well, with us here, Beit Shammai Omrim Hariyesh Te Kesef. So there's a machlokas in our Mishnah between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel about the minimum amount for Olas Ria and the Shalmei Chagigah, or the Korban Chagigah. And the Mishnah had said, if you want to take a quick look back at the Mishnah so we refresh ourselves, this is Beis Mad Aleph, the end of the Mishnah, the last three lines of the Mishnah, after all the examples are given about who can go up and who can't go up and who can be carried and who can walk and everything. So the last three lines of the Mishnah, or four lines, Beit Shammai Omrim Hariya Shtei Kesef, Chagigah Ma Kesef. Korban Riyah was 2 kesefs, and the Chagigah was 1 kesef. So which
you said then, did you? Or?
I said Ma'ah. Ma'ah.
So 2 ma'as.
2 ma'as versus 1 ma'ah.
Chagigah was 1 ma'ah.
Correct. So according to Beit Shammai, which was the larger, which had a larger, then this is the minimum amount the korban has to be. You could have it more. But the minimum amount, therefore, for the Olas Ria was twice as much as the Shalmei Chagigah. Okay? Well, Beis Hillel says exactly the reverse. Beis Hillel mim Hariya Ma Kesef, Chagigah Shtei Kesef. Beis Hillel says, no, Olas Ria is 1, and the Korban Chagigah is 2. So, obviously, each can be more and more, but there's an understanding, perhaps, that the larger the shear,
the more important.
The more important. You could argue perhaps with that, right? But the fact that they differentiate somehow kind of create stature, or may have a special reason for it. So the Gemara gives a whole discussion really about that, and that's the piece we're going to get into. Beit Shammai Hariyesh Te Kesef. Let's go to Vav Mad Aleph with a long introduction. Tan Rabbanan. Beit Shammai Omrim Hariyesh Te Kesef. This is a brisa which expands and explains the Mishnah. Beit Shammai says the Olas Ria is 2 and Chagigah is Ma Kesef 1. Why? She'Riyah Ola Kula Legavoha. Because the Olas Ria is an Ola, and what happens to it is burnt.
Right.
If it's burnt, Mashen Ke Chagigah, which the Chagigah is not completely burnt, right? Only small parts of it, only some of the fats. So if that's the case, the one that's burnt is more important. If it's more important, it ought to be the larger, the more valuable. So if you have to separate and allocate, you want to allocate to that which is more important rather than that which is less important.
Because it's burnt completely. In other words, Hashem wants it.
In other words, who's eating it? HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eating it. Kaviyachol. Right. We don't look at burning as being destroyed. Look at burning as being an offering to the Almighty. Whereas the Shalmei Chagigah is primarily eaten by you and your family, and the Kohanim get a bit, and some of it is burnt on the altar. So the Almighty is only being fed part of the korban.
Right.
Therefore, which is more important? Olas Ria. Okay? That's one reason. The Ode, Matzino Batzeres Shariba Ben Akasav Be'olos Yosem B'Mishlamim. Another reason, says the Gemara, in the holiday of Shavuos, in listing the Karbanos, it says Shivas Kvasim Tmimim Upar Ben Bakar Echad V'Lim Shnoim Ye'olol Hashem. And then, so there's a whole bunch of Karbanos, I think it's a total of 10, which are going to be 7 plus 1 plus 2, right. 7 kvasim, 1 par, and 2 elim are going to be ola, and Ushnei Kvasim B'nei Shonos Zevach Shlomim. And on Shavuos, there'll be 2 Kvasim which are for Shlomim. So on Shavuos, the split is 10 for Ola and 2 for Shlomim. So we want to make the comparison, therefore, if that works for these Karbanos, which are not the same as being brought by the pilgrim.
Right.
These are communal sacrifices, but it indicates the Torah is giving us a template, giving us a model to follow. Whenever you have more or less, the more goes for the Shlomim, and the less goes, the more goes for the Ola, and less goes for the Shlomim. Okay?
Why do we do this for Shavuos? Because of this particular pasuk?
Because the pasuk enumerates that you have different Karbanos, and it has a greater number for. Why? I don't know why. Why Shavuos more than anything else? I don't know.
Is it because of this future pasuk that...
This one that's going to come up?
Yes.
I don't know, because we haven't gotten there yet. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay? Well, it definitely shows that Atzeres is one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, so it is connected. But the Karbanos, are just we keep in mind, Karbanos are very different. They're communal sacrifices, not personal sacrifices. So that's the opinion of Beis Shammai. So Beis Shammai has 2 reasons. One reason is because God is holy, and therefore if you give it all to God, it's more important. Second is, if you look at the template for Shavuos, you got more Olos and less Shlomim. Beis Hillel says the other way around. Riyah Kabbalah also has 1 and Chagigah is 2. Why? Chagigah yeshno fnei adibor. The korban Chagigah was given before Matan Torah. Masha ein kein b'riyah. On the other hand, the korban Riyah was not given before Matan Torah, which means, and here's where this pasuk comes up, that this pasuk, and this is how Beis Hillel understands it, that the pasuk, even though it talks about Olos and Shlomim, it says the Shlomim, vayizbechu zvachim Shlomim Lashem, that is the equivalent of the Shalmei Chagigah that's being brought by this group before Matan Torah at Har Sinai.
But first, that pasuk also.
Now the Olos is something else. So you're going to say, what about the Olos? The Gemara is going to ask that question, right? Because it looks like if you have both of them, the Gemara's assumption, or Beis Hillel's assumption, that these Chagigahs that are being brought are Chagigahs that are equivalent to the Shalmei Chagigah, whereas these Riyahs were simply unrelated to anything that took place later and so forth. Okay, right.
Doesn't sound too...
No, I think they must have gone by that.
Right, so in this case. So the Gemara is going to ask it later on, but there are Olos as well.
Right. Yeah.
So you know there are Olos because I gave you the pasuk.
Right.
If you hadn't gotten the pasuk, you wouldn't have been clever enough to raise that question.
These guys knew the pasuk.
Correct. Okay, so it's a setup. Okay. So they'll have to come up with an answer.
Absolutely.
Remember, there's a Rashi, there's a long Rashi, Yeshnaf Nadi, but Rashi points out, even though this comes out after Matan Torah, the end of Mishpatim, Ein Muktam Mochav Torah, this really chronologically takes place before. And if you want to know why they don't ask about the Olos, Gemara is going to ask that later on. Okay. Yeah. So everything's being predestined here. So the first reason is therefore that, and therefore, what's the premise? If the Olos were given before Matan Torah, if the Chagigahs were given before Matan Torah, that gives them greater validity.
Is that the Tadir rule?
I don't know if it's Tadir, or it means it's a Sinai rule. You see that it was set up exactly at Sinai, before Sinai. It has a pre-existing pattern. So therefore, it's a carbon that existed before. Okay.
You already had the obligation. How important it was even before the.
Well, Tadir, Tadir.
I know, but they didn't go like that.
Okay. So the assumption is, the premise is that we have to assume that these Olos.
These are the Chagigah, not Olos, right?
Yeah, yes.
Right, the Chagigos were like the carbon. These Zvachim, the Shlomim, were like the carbon Chagigah.
Right.
Okay. Right. Okay.
That's what he said. That's what the Gemara said. Chagigah yeshna lifnei adibor. So
right.
And if you say that's the pasuk, then that's what he's saying it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
He's saying.
So what's the Olos? So the Olos is not an Olas Riyah. It's going to be defined as an Olas Tamid.
What's an Olas Tamid?
Every day there were daily offerings brought. Olas Tamid. We read it. Okay, right. We have Shachris and Mincha representative of the carbon Olas Aboker, Olas Tamid, Tamid Shel Shachar, Tamid Shel Ben Abayim.
But those are communal offerings, not a personal offering.
So first of all, this is all before Matan Torah. All the rules are out. You can make it what you want to make it.
And these were communal offerings too in the Torah here.
Correct.
This puzzle.
Right. Okay, so they're communal offerings. They're bringing communal offerings as a group.
Yeah, they're good.
Right. They're not bringing. That's correct. They're not bringing personal offerings like you bring in neder. You're not bringing personal offerings like you bring a personal korban korban. So, but we're assuming that the Chagigah is like the korban Chagigah, and the Ola is like the Olas Talmud, which is born every day.
Right.
Okay. You can accept it or not accept it. You can say the premise is faulty, or you can assume that Beis Shammai may have thought they had a tradition, or this whole story itself.
Beis
Hillel. This whole story, this whole chapter is a very difficult story to understand. Right? I mean, the fact that you have there the very bottom of this page in Pasuk Yud, right? What does it say? Let's look what it says here. Vayiru eis Elohei Yisrael v'sachas raglav k'masei levnato sapir k'etzem shemaim l'tohar v'latzil b'nei Yisrael l'shalach yado v'echezuat v'alehim v'echlu v'yishtu. Okay, so they're seeing God. What are they seeing? What's this mystical vision? How many psukim do you have about seeing God and about describing God in the Torah? V'sachas raglav, under his feet, like the sapphires, right? Paved work of sapphire. What does that even mean? So the whole chapter is like really a very unusual chapter. Why they bring a korban? Who even needs a korban at this point? Right? Have korbanos even been set up?
But
well, they had the korban Pesach. Right, we know that.
But who are the Asilei B'nai Yisrael?
The youngsters or nobility. Very, very, very obscure. Very, very obscure pairing.
But we know that we had the Avos built Mizbachim. They all been Mizbachim. They must have brought something.
Well, I'm trying to say, because of its obscurity and it's hard to fathom, it's not unreasonable, or it could be accepted, even it is unreasonable, that the Ola is what you think it is, and the Chagigah is and the Shlomim is what you think it is. So in the eyes of Beis Hillel, the Shlomim are Shlomim Chagigah, the Olas are Olas Atamid, not Olas Ariyah. Okay, that's the premise we're starting with. Okay. So that's the first reason for Beis Hillel. Excuse me. שהחגיגה יש נתנדיבה מה שאין כבריאה ויוד מצינו בנשיאים שריבה מקוסה בשלמים יוסר מבעולות. When it talks about in Parshas Naso, and it lists all the different korban shlomim and the olos, there are many, many, many more shlomim. There's like 210 shlomim, and the olos are much smaller. So that's, once again, that is a communal sacrifice. Or maybe it's not. Those are personal sacrifices. They're one-time personal sacrifices, but they're one-time personal sacrifices. But so the template is not exact for bringing a korban every time you go to Beis Mikdash on a yantiv, but at least it's a personal sacrifice.
Plus, with a special occasion, it shows how important it was.
Correct. Right? Okay. So the fact that it's a special occasion, the question is that replicatable to other occasions that are not so special. But at least there's an example. In other words, there's an example where you see that there's more shlomim than olos. Okay, so the two reasons that Beis Hillel says are as follows.
Why is it personal? It's community. It's being brought on behalf of the Shevet, no?
The Shevet. That's what I say with the Shvatim.
So it's not. I mean, it's more communal than personal.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's. But again, they were trying to show the importance, right? And that, I think, is the main point they're trying to make, right? And they decided to bring more shlomim, and so clearly are more important.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. Okay. But whatever it is, there's a template whether it's communal or personal, there's a template for it. Well, the reason I'm saying it's personal, because you see the Gemara is going to try to find the pircha later on with all these, the question with all these examples. The weak point about the Nesiim is not going to be that it's communal versus personal. The weak point is going to be that the Nesiim was a one-time deal.
Right.
And therefore, it's a one-time deal, it's a special rules.
Right.
Special occasion rules. So we have two reasons. The two reasons Beis Shammai was God is more holy, therefore the Olah is greater. Second reason is on Shavuos there were more Olos than Shlomim. Beis Hillel says the other way around for the numbers, because first reason was that well, the reason Beis Shammai again, Beis Hillel again. That it's Yeshlef Ne'adi, but it happened before Sinai. And second of all, we have the template in the Siyam. Okay. Well, Beis Hillel, now we got to understand why each one doesn't like the answers, the reason of the other. Well, Beis Hillel, my time alone, like Beis Shammai. Okay, why doesn't Beis Hillel follow Beis Shammai? Ka'amret Re'iyadi for the Ola. Ka'amret Re'iyadi for the Ola Kula Gvoa. You thought that we're saying that carbon Riyah is greater because it gets burnt up for Hashem. Adrabah Chagigah Difa, this B'shtei Achilos. Those Chagigah is better. Olas Riyah only goes up to God. But the carbon Chagigah has God and man involved. So it's servicing greater numbers. Now, the sum total is God gets less, but God never gets less because God owns everything. So if a carbon only services God by being burnt up, and the other carbon services God and services the owner, it's got greater validity, or greater value, or greater utility. So therefore, that's the knockoff for that. With the Ka'amrat Ne'elef Me'atzeres, and the second reason for Beis Shammai, let's learn from the template of Atzeres that had more Olos and less Shlomim. Danim carbon Yachid mi carbon Yachid mi Danim carbon Yachid mi carbon Tzibar. No, the carbon of Shavuos that was brought in by Yikra is talking about the communal holiday sacrifices. You can't apply that to what an individual brings in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, that's the Yachid versus Rabbi. So that's why Beis Hillel can't learn like Beis Shammai. First of all, greater utility, giving it to people to eat, and second of all, carbon Yachid is not the same as carbon Tzibah. The other way around. Beis Shammai, my time alone make Beis Hillel. Why does Beis Shammai not follow Beis Hillel? So the answer is the carbon Chagigah Difa Di'eshlef Ne'adibar. This is what you guys will ask before. When you said the carbon Chagigah is greater because it had a pre-existent parameters because it existed before Matan Torah. Ri'anam Yeshlef Ne'adibar. It says the Olos. Right? What is Beis Shammai going to say? The Olas in this pasuk is not Olas Atomid, Olas Riyah. Right? What you guys all said. Yeah. Right? So it also exists before. So you can't prove to me that the carbon Chagigah is more important because it existed before the Olas Riyah. The Olas Riyah was there. You got it wrong, Beis Hillel. Okay? With the Ka'amrat Ne'elef Menasiyim, and you want to learn from the Karbanos Menasiyim brought in the end of Parshas Naso, Danim Davar Noag L'Doros, Medavar Noag L'Doros, then Danim Davar Noag L'Doros, Medavar Shein Noag L'Doros. You all can go and learn for something that has a repetitive nature and comes up again and again, which is going to be the carbon of Atzeres, which may be a carbon for Rabim, but at least it repeats every year. The Nasiim was a one-time deal. One-time deal has rules that are made to be broken in any other time. Okay? So this revolves around the fact, to some extent, that the carbon, what was the carbon Ola in this chapter? Was the carbon Ola here in Olas Riyah, or
was the Riyah?
Or
wasn't the Riyah?
Olas Tamid. Okay?
Oh, in this chapter.
In this chapter, the one I gave you, right? The chapter at Sinai. What kind of carbon is the Ola? The Chagigah, everybody seems to say, is the carbon Shameh Chagigah, or equivalent to it. But what is the carbon Ola here? Is it Olas Riyah? Or is it Olas Atomid? Who says what? So Beis Shammai, who says what? So
I guess Beis Shammai would have to say that it's Riyah, no?
Right.
Beis Shammai, I think.
So Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel says it's Olas Tamid. Right. Beis Hillel says Olas Tamid. Yeah. And Beis Shammai says Olas Riyah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So now the Gemara says, the Beis Hillel ma'ishnach Chagigah di'eshlach ne'adibar. So the Gemara asks the question on base, now back on Beis Hillel. According to Beis Hillel, it's an Olas Tamid. Right. Let's look at the Psukim. Why can't you equate the two? Beis Hillel ma'ishnach Chagigah di'eshlach ne'adibar. Why say Chagigah is more important? Because it exists before the Matan Torah, the Chsiv. And here's the pasuk for the first time. I'm going back and forth. Vayizbechu zvachim shlomim. Vayizbechu zvachim. Right, shlamim. That's the pasuk we use. Ria nami haksiv. The same pasuk says vayalu olot.
Right.
So why does Beis Hillel separate and say it's no olas tamid? But it says it's got olos right there in this pasuk.
Why aren't they both, in other words, equivalent?
Correct.
Same day,
Correct.
same purpose.
So so the Gemara gives an answer which is going to tie into another machlokes. Just warn you, it gets a little rocky about what type of karbanos existed at which time in the midbar. So Gemara's answer is, why does Beis Hillel say it's an olas tamid and not an olas riyah? Because Sabri Beis Hillel, ola shekrivu Yisrael b'midbar, olas tamid havai. No, Beis Hillel holds it's an olas tamid. That's his assumption. Okay, why? And Beis Hillel Sabri, ola shekrivu Yisrael b'midbar, olas riyah havai. Then Beis Shammai is going to say it's olas riyah. So now we have for the first time black and white what we've been talking about before. Okay. Now, why can it not be? Does that mean olas tamid and not olas riyah? We don't really know.
I don't know.
Wait,
No
look.
way to know. Plus, again, it was a one-shot deal.
So here's the key. From this statement of Beis Hillel, who says it's olas tamid,
Right.
we don't know why he's forced to say this. But in 3 lines, the Gemara is going to say that there are 3 or 4 Amoraim, 3 or 4 Tanoim who all agree with the premise that it was no olas tamid. And then there are 3 Tanoim who agree it's an olas riyah.
Yeah. But there's
Okay.
no way to...
Of the three, the first one is Beis Hillel, and the second group is Beis Shammai. The next 2 in each group are not necessarily comparable. It's not A against B and C against D. They may be independents. But when we'll get to learn those, they will be more emphatic why they feel it has to be no olas riyah or no olas tamid. Right? And why it could not be no olas riyah. And it has to deal with how karbanos were processed. It has to do possibly how the Torah was given at Sinai. Was the Torah, when Moshe comes down at Har Sinai, does he come down and tell the Jewish people the entire Torah? Right? Or does he tell them, like, hey, we're going to have karbanos, but when we set up an Ol Moed, I'll tell you about the karbanos. But you don't have to know about it now. As each item comes up, Moshe teaches them pieces, which is kind of what you really feel when you read the Torah. Because you have the whole Matan Torah, then you have different places through the Torah where Moshe says, in the name of Hashem, by Moshe Lema this, by Moshe Lema this. So what happened before that? So ostensibly that people didn't know about it, right? So is that part of Matan Torah as an ongoing basis, or was Matan Torah just the rules, the klalos, or did Moshe really give them everything, and then when it becomes applicable, goes back and teaches them piece by piece? So that's a fundamental machlokes. Why is this important? Because we'll have to deal with how karbanos were processed, which is not told to us until Vayikra.
Right.
So if you're trying to connect certain karbanos at Har Sinai to what took place later on, the implication is at Har Sinai the karban was processed the same way, but that hasn't been given yet. Or it means they brought the same karban, but didn't process the different organs that were given or not given. So that's so I'm saying from Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, we're not going to really have the reason. From the other 2 of the 3 in each of the Talmud sides or Riyah side, the Gemara is going to be more expansive to say why they have to hold this or not that.
Are we saying, it sounds like it, right, that Moshe didn't get the whole Torah on Har Sinai, in fact, but that Hashem, when it says Vayidaber Hashem later on and says, do this, Hashem is actually telling Moshe at that point, do that.
So it means they did get the Torah in Har Sinai, but they didn't really know it and understand
Not just them, Moshe. Let's stay with Moshe.
Okay.
Moshe
got it.
I'm saying.
Moshe got it, but the people don't get it. It's not. Remember, for Torah to be important, it's not just that Moshe gets in Har Sinai, that Moshe then gives it to the people.
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
So of course, one can argue, of course, the 10 Commandments are the Torah in a microcosm. There are 10 different categories, as Rav Sat Jul argues. Okay. So that's going to be a fundamental machlokas. Or does one say, that
Moshe knew it all, but just
I acquired Masechet Chagigah, but every week I learn a little bit more. Is that what it is, or they learned everything?
In other words, they were taught everything by Moshe. Right?
Right.
Right back.
I once had a teacher who was, a number of years ago, who unfortunately was not successful. He was a very brilliant person. As a young person, came up from New York, and he never translated what he learned in his school of education to a classroom. It was funny at first, but of course it became very difficult because every time something would come up, we'd explain. He says, "Oh, that's what the professor used to tell us. Oh, that's what I read in the book." So he had the book knowledge, he didn't really apply it. And maybe it's the same thing in kinds of Torah. They had it, they learned it, but they didn't really understand what it means. You can learn like we learn korbanos. What's a korban?
Sure.
What does that mean?
You haven't seen it. You don't know what it is.
Right. So can you do it? Can you apply it? I mean, the Baal Korah gets up and reads it. Many Baalei Kriya don't know what they're reading or don't really understand each piece, each word.
Sure.
So that's one way to understand it. It's very complex to understand what this means.
The obligation isn't to understand when the Baal Korah is reading. The obligation is to enunciate.
Correct.
It's not. It isn't that. But
it's not exactly a perfect analogy.
It's different because the obligation when you're learning Torah, you have to understand what you're learning.
Right.
You just don't hear what you're learning. But Moshe, my understanding is he understood everything that came down from him.
So it's less of a concern of Moshe. Moshe understood everything, but Moshe, what does Moshe transmit when he comes down? Does he transmit everything? Do people get the whole ball of wax? Or do people get it drips and drabs? Do they get it all together, then it's a chazara?
Right.
Or does it go continually as they're going along? Okay? Now,
The other thing I was wondering, this Pasuk 5,
yeah.
this is, you were saying before Matan Torah?
Yeah.
Well, the Gemara used the term lifnei hadibur. Lifnei
That's what I was
hadibur.
referring to. So how can we say that this is a korban riyah? We don't have the mitzvah of the oil moed or the mishkan. I mean, and the whole.
So the answer is the Shechina Har Sinai is the place. Look down below. They're saying Tachas Elokei Tachas Raglav. Now, of course, it's different, right? All Asriya, when you went to the Beis Hamikdash, you had to travel. So here it's not exactly travel. They're there. I said the one thing going for it, and I said this before, the one thing going for it, and I believe it underscores it, though the Gemara doesn't say it, and Jack corrected me that I'm a day off, is that this is one of the pilgrimage festivals. This is taking place at Shavuos. So if the place is not the right place, right, then at least the time is the right time. And I don't remember. Do they bring the korban riyah or the korban Chagigah to Shiloh? I don't remember.
You would think
They did the Olah. I remember learning Shmuel Bey.
Okay.
Olah.
Yeah.
Was it the Olah Sriya? We'll assume so.
No. It says read them at Pnei Hashem. So here they
No, it was
are.
not. Well, it was one where the coin gets several pieces, several parts.
Okay. But I'm not sure what exactly Kohen got pieces of many korbanos. So I don't know if I just don't know. I don't know what happened at Shiloh, what didn't happen at Shiloh. I'm saying it's not unreasonable to assume wherever Beis Hamikdash would have been, right?
Yeah.
So,
Like you said, you said, even in the pilgrimage, it says, read them, Lord, Pnei Hashem, Rekam.
Right.
So here you said, they actually saw, really saw Pnei Hashem.
Right. See, right? It's really not equivalent, right? It's very different. It's before. It's actually at Matan Torah, before Matan Torah. It's not in Yerushalayim. It's not in the Beis Hamikdash. They don't have luchos. The luchos haven't been created. They don't have Torah yet, right? But that's why when the Gemara is looking for a precursor.
But look at Pasuk Zion. Vayikat Sefer HaBrit.
Right.
What's Sefer HaBrit?
Exactly. What about Talmud itself? It says, Vayichtov Moshe Hashem.
Right.
Well, clearly he's writing something.
So he's writing something, but we know that there are certain mitzvahs to get it, Mara, Masam, Riva, right? So maybe these are precursor mitzvahs they have. I'm not sure. Okay, it means Vayikat.
It's a strange place.
Right. The whole thing is strange, right? I know it reads like the Torah was given, and the Sefer Bris has got to be the Sefer Torah, of course, right? But it can't be. And Chazal don't accept this. Chazal clearly accept this whole chapter as pre-Sinai, the lead up to Sinai.
Gotcha.
Right? It's the lead up to Sinai. And as I told you, the aftermath of Sinai, this didn't exist. Moshe didn't come down. Moshe's up on Sinai till 40 days. And when he comes down, the story is much different. And this is not a story that happens after Yom Kippur, after the second Luchos. So you can decide you want to put the story any way you want in Jewish history, but the approach of Chazal is taking place on the run up to Har Sinai. I'm telling you, the whole story is a strange story, and you know what? No one ever really studies it. I'm saying no one studies it. We don't study it because if you're reading the parashas, the end of Mishpatim, there are all these laws of Mishpatim you get hung up on, right? If you're teaching children, this is like a story that doesn't seem to follow sequence. By the time you went through the 10 plagues and Kriyas Yamsuf and Mishpatim, you want to get on to the rest of the story, Egel Azov or the Mishkan. So this chapter is not as studied as often as we should, including yours truly.
Even the second time when he goes up, right? Didn't it say, let nobody else go up with you?
Right.
Because here
so why these guys, why are they on the sun? Right. It's okay.
It's a very strange story.
But that's why I gave it to you, because if I simply gave you the pasuk, you'd miss all the nuances.
Absolutely.
Right. What's important is Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel are looking for a precursor.
Right.
The earliest time that we have a communal sacrifice being brought by the Jewish people or representatives in communion with God.
That's this.
That's this.
That's it.
There ain't nothing before this. The only carbon we have before this is Carbon Pesach, which is clearly a holiday celebration. The only carbonos that we have written before that is carbonos of the Avos,
Right.
which it's a completely different story.
There's no carbon that Israel gave between the time they left Mitzrayim until Har Sinai? Zero?
You're going to research it for homework and let us know next week at the
Okay, not a problem.
Okay?
Not a problem.
Maybe, I don't know. Now, no, you said you go through Psukim, okay? So at any rate, so what we have at this point is we kind of divided the machlokas or set the machlokas Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel to revolve specifically about whether this is Olas Tamid or Olas Riyah.
Right.
That's clear. Why it is one and why the other one is not so clear. They seem to have very strong beliefs, but that becomes boom the machlokas, how they interpret and why one can use this pasuk, why one can't use the pasuk as a precursor. So having said that, read again. Now Rabbi comes along and says, we're going to go really far afield, and we're going to tell you about all the other people who believe that the Ola in the midbar, this Ola, was Olas Riyah. We're going to tell you about all the people who believe that it was Olas Atamid. Okay, so Amar Rabbi, look at Rabbi, Beit Shammai, Rabbi Lazar, is it Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Eliezer?
El-Azhar.
Oh, it also has Rabbi Shmuel down below. Okay, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Eliezer, because the order is reversed. Beit Shammai, Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Eliezer. Kulus Sfirle Ola Shikri V'Sovamid Bar Olas Riyavai. These three guys all hold it's an Olas Riyah. Beit Hillel, Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Yosef Glili, Kulus Sfirle Ola Shikri V'Sovamid Bar Olas Tamid Avai. Okay. What does that have to do with anything?
It's a strange. Normally, the Gemara doesn't go counting heads and saying, how.
It does.
Well, I mean, we have the rule you go after, you go according to majority, right?
It's not a vote. It's not a vote.
No. So you say this is a usual.
There are times not that frequent. There are times where the Gemara brings out a machloka. It says, you know what? There are other people who say the same thing, and then the Gemara we'll talk about the first guy we talked about, the second guy, third guy, fourth guy, and then we'll go back to talk about the topic. Well, the reason I think the Gemara brings it here, and this is my theory, is because it doesn't explain to us why Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, each one says one, each one says the other. So when they bring down the other opinions, some of them will offer reasons why it has to be one and not the other. So it can help you understand the machlokas, what the underpinnings of machlokas is, or we don't know if Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have a different reason altogether. Right? Because right now, we've quantified what the machlokas is, about all Riyah, all Tamid. We don't know why. Why is each one so hits that their opinion is right? Because the story is so strange, it can be whatever you want it to be.
But now we know who's backing one side, who's backing the other. So.
Right, but what's important is that
why they back.
Well, we don't
know why Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai are backing, but we're going to bring the others and we'll learn from them. Right. And quite honestly, it's a pretty heavy team on either side.
Yeah.
Okay. So, which means what the Gemara is trying to say, by the way, that each side is clearly valid. Right? By the way, we don't know from our Mishnah what the reason is.
No, not yet.
This is only being brought in the Brisa. correct? Is the brisa really giving? Is the brisa really saying Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, or is the brisa giving us the reason that they think it to be? It looks like it's Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, right? It's a brisa, but it's still only a brisa. Okay, so we have 3 verses 3. I think the last lines of this page are Beis Shammai Hadi Amaras. The first is going to go. It goes to 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. So first of the 3 is Beis Shammai, who says that it's going to be a carbon. Beis Shammai says Olas Ria. Correct. Beis Shammai says Olas Ria. Okay. So Beis Shammai says the Gemara Hadi Amaran. Okay, Beis Shammai you already had. We don't have to tell you which Beis Shammai. It's this Beis Shammai. We don't know the reason Beis Shammai. That's all we know about it. So we've dispatched one of the first team, right? Oh no, we haven't dispatched it. We simply said we don't have to go into any further. Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, so now the second of the team about being Olas Ria is going to be Rabbi Shmuel, the Tanya. Rabbi Shmuel, and this comes to what I told you before, how the Torah was given. Rabbi Shmuel says this machlokas Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. So if we understand one half of this machlokas, we'll understand the other half. So this is A and B. This is the 2 players here, Rabbi Shmuel versus Rabbi Kiva, famous adversaries throughout many places. So Rabbi Shmuel says what? Klolos nemu b'Sinai upratos b'Yohel Moed. Okay, that Rabbi Shmuel says in Har Sinai they learned the rules, but later on, as they want the general rules, right? When they built the Ohel Moed later on, HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe from on top of the Parochas. Then we have all the laws that come up in Sefer Vayikra about Karbanos. Okay, so therefore, if Rabbi Shmuel holds this, it can't be that this is going to be the Olas Tamid.
Right, because that was only given in
Because the Olas Tamid is only given in Vayikra.
Right.
Once they have the Ol Moed.
Exactly.
If it's not the Olas Tamid, so what kind of Ola must this be? Olas Ria, as Beis Shammai says.
Exactly.
Okay, that's the logic here.
Very logical.
Okay, and Rabbi Akiva says, what's Rabbi Akiva the other side? Rabbi Akiva mar klos the prados nemra b'Sinai v'nishnu bi'almoid v'nishtalshu bi'arvus lov. That's the one that we feel is more traditional. They got all the Torah Sinai. They repeated it later on in the Ol Moed when they had to bring Karbanos, and then in Arvos Moav when Moshe dies and then Moshe tells over Sefer Dvarim. It's a repetition for the 3rd time. But in other words, it's again and again and again. But they got the whole book, or they got all the laws and understood or heard all the laws at the beginning.
But that doesn't really help as much, because the fact that they got them all means they got both the Tamid and the Riyah. Let's say before, according to so how do you know which one is the one given?
So the argument is going to be that if Rabbi Shmuel holds one opinion, Rabbi Akiva is going to be the opposite. That's why he disagrees with them.
I understand. I'm saying Rabbi Shmuel seems to make more sense in the sense that he said, if that's true, then there's only one conclusion you can come to.
So
if you hold Rabbi Akiva, you could say it still could be either.
Correct.
But you learn, since Rabbi Akiva is on the other side, therefore by inference.
I know what Rabbi Akiva believed. But I'm just saying, I don't find it as strong.
Okay,
it's inference.
So the Gemara now goes back to explain Rabbi Shmuel. V'isol gedaitach ola shekrivu yisol b'midbar olas tamin avoy. This is what I just told you a moment ago. If you, Rabbi Shmuel, hold, and remember they haven't gotten the Torah laws yet about bringing karbanos.
But he doesn't hold.
No, he doesn't. It's an if-then clause. If you were to hold that the Ola at Sinai is a Talmud, which you don't, Rabbi Shmuel, because you hold it's Olas Ria.
Right.
But if you hold it's an Olas Talmud, then Mika Mida the Mekar Loboy Hafshif Nituach Losofoi Hafshif Nituach. There were certain parts that had to be flailed and skinned and cut up in a certain way for the carbon Olas Talmud. Right, and that even though it was an ola and burnt up completely, it wasn't burnt up as a whole carcass. It was divided and separated and skinned. So, which is the Kriyas Torah we have in Rosh Chodesh, right? And if that's only given at Ohel Moed,
right,
and this carbon at Sinai is a carbon Tamid, they didn't learn yet the laws about Hafshev and Nituach. So you mean to say they brought a carbon Tamid now the wrong way, without knowing what to do, and later on they brought a carbon that they skinned? You could argue, you could respond and say, yes, Right, they didn't learn it yet, so they didn't have to do it. But Rabbi Yishmael's assumption is no. This, therefore, is a carbon olas re'iyah, right, which is burnt up completely. It does not have those special laws. I don't know how it was burnt. And therefore, even though they hadn't learned the laws yet they hadn't learned about laws about karbanos, they burnt this, they burnt that. There wasn't a requirement. There were special requirements for the olas tamid that only apply to olas tamid, which only appear after the karbanos are given.
Exactly.
Right? So what we've dispatched with now is we have Beishamai, we have Rabbi Shmuel. To some extent, we've learned the flip side, which is Rabbi Akiva. We really haven't. We've inferred it only, and now we come to the third of the trilogy of the Beishamai team, which is Rabbi Eliezer, who's going to say that that it's going to be a carbon olas ria at Sinai, not a tamid. Why? Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanya, Olas HaTamid Hoasuya Bahar Sinai. Okay, this is the Kriyas and Torah for Rosh Chodesh. All right, Olas Tamid Hoasuya Bahar Sinai Lereach Michoach. Yes.
What does it mean?
It's not for Rosh Chodesh?
Because I blamed Rosh Chodesh. I remember Hasu.
Maybe not Rosh Chodesh.
What does it mean? Ha'asuyah?
Sure.
It was made. It was
Right.
off.
Olas Tamid should be the beginning of the fourth Aliyah in Rosh Chodesh. Maybe you only learned the first three. See if I'm right. No? I win or I lose? What's the fourth Aliyah in Rosh Chodesh? Oh, what's the third Aliyah? And then you go back to third Aliyah. There you go, third Aliyah. Okay. So you only learned the first two.
But you're a Levi, right? You're a Levi, right?
Also Balko, right? So the third Aliyah, okay. So that's so the Rosh Chodesh, which I mean is very famous, but it begins saying Olas Tamid. It's an Olas Tamid. Hoasuya Bahar Sinai. That was something was made in Har Sinai.
Right.
So wait. So Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Maaseha Nemru B'Sinai V'hi Atzma Lo Kreva. Okay.
But it was.
So. So he interprets exactly the point. Now you may disagree with him, of course, but Rabbi Eliezer has the opinion that when it says asuyah does not mean it was brought, which is what you could have argued, right? You could have argued it was brought. He says no, that's not what it means. It means ma'aseh nemru b'Sinai. If you will, he's taking the tack that it was taught at Sinai,
but not offered at Sinai,
but not done at Sinai.
Right.
In other words, he's going to follow the opinion that the entire Torah was taught at Sinai, not following the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel that only general rules are given. He'll follow Rabbi Akiva about Torah given the entire thing at Sinai, but even though the entire Torah was given at Sinai and taught, the actual effecting to bring the specific laws of the Olas Tamid didn't take place at Sinai until later on when they had the Ol Moed.
But why? It was Yontiv, it was Shavuos, and they didn't do it. They had the law.
I don't know why not. It would seem that if it says Hasuyah means they started bringing it then. But it's clear. What is clear is that Rabbi Eliezer is clearly on the Beis Shammai side.
Right.
He must have had this tradition that it was not that they learned, that even though they learned it, it was not brought. In other words, I think his tradition starts the other way around. That the old law at Sinai was no lasriya.
Right.
Or it says Asuyah Bar Sinai. It says no. Hamaseha were Asuyah B'Sinai, but not the carbon.
Yeah, I think.
By the way, it's not the drush is not that outlandish because I don't know of any carbon that's asuya.
Right.
It's usually kreva,
Right.
ha kreva or ha nikrav.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's a special lasha.
Asuya means was made. What do you mean made? Asuya.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know. I don't know. We could research if it comes other places, but clearly it stands out.
No, I think he's saying.
Okay.
It's only by
Jack is going to
Yikra.
check that out as well.
I think
Okay.
he's saying, Rabbi, it's only by Yikra that Hashem says, bring this tummy. Right? Bring it tummy.
So what is he
maybe
saying?
he told
What is
him about
saying
it
happened
Sinai.
to this korban at Har Sinai? Ha'asui.
It was taught.
happened?
It was taught.
It was taught.
It was
how to
taught.
do it.
Asui means was done. Something was done. Something
Yeah,
happened.
lasot. It's from. It really does mean done.
Yeah. It's not the normal word used for bringing the korban. They use the word.
My understanding is it means that it was taught. They learned the masim. They learned the ma'isala. They learned the.
I have a computer program. I have a dictionary. I'll check.
Well, look, you got an English translation. What asuya means?
Okay.
I believe. My understanding was it.
He's saying he had small lo karba.
Yeah, they didn't bring it. They learned about it. They learned about ma'asiyam, how to do it. They learned the maisas of how to bring the karban, but they didn't bring it.
Maisa means something that just happened.
They
Done.
correct. They learned the acts. They learned. That's how I'm quite sure that's how the Gemara's understanding this.
Absolutely. It's clear.
They learned the acts of the karban, but they didn't do the acts. On Har Sinai, they learned the acts.
It's offered.
Okay.
was
Shmot
offered.
Perek Gimel. Asuya. This is. I looked up Asuya in Shmot Perek Gimel and Bamidbar Perek Chet.
Right.
So.
Most paragraph of Gimel.
Ma'asek Ma'asehem.
What's the shorish?
Oh, Tamid. Okay, so the first Asuya is really in Bamidbar where it talks about La Tamid.
What's the shorish?
Lo tami.
Oh, said?
La Tamid HaKavas Achat Asava Bagwar.
That's what we just read.
That's our
It's read.
Right. That is really the only
What's the
Asuya
other?
in all.
What's the-
what's the shorish?
Just
I'm
What's the
sure.
shorish?
I'm
that's the
sure.
only time.
I'm sure I'm right. It's what it says.
Does it give you the
Ma'aseh
shorish?
b'Sinai. It doesn't say Ma'aseh Asuya b'Sinai. Look what he says. Look what Rabbi Lezer says. You may not like Rabbi Lezer. It's Ma'aseh Nemu b'Sinai. Its acts were said on Sinai, but it was never brought on Sinai.
That's what he said.
Asuya is a unique term.
Yeah.
Does it give a shorish?
No, but it's,
Yeah, look at it.
it is in Malachim Beit a few times.
The procedures were all.
So?
The procedures were offered.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Say it again.
It's translated, Nemu B'Sinai, means that the procedure of its offering were stated at Sinai.
Right. The procedures.
Stated.
So Masel is procedure. The way you do it. Yes.
The way you do it, yeah.
The
It
acts.
wasn't act, it wasn't...
Okay, that's why I said acts. I'm sorry. Procedures. Procedures.
Yeah, the way you do it.
The acts. How to do it. The how to. The how to do it was taught at Sinai.
The actual doing of
But the actual doing doesn't happen later on. That's Rabbi Lezer. And Rabbi Lezer's chiddush is that even though they learned it at Sinai,
Right.
even though they learned the how to at Sinai, they put it away. It wasn't done practically. It was put for later on.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the simple drash, the simple meaning. Right. And in fact, who argues in Rabbi Lezer? Rabbi Kiva. Boom. Okay. Rabbi Kiva Omar. Kreva Meshuv Lo Pascha. Okay, so in other words, when Rabbi Kiva says Ma'olas Tamid Ho'asuya Bar Sinai, it was done. How come it says Asuya not Kreva? It wasn't just a one-time Kreva. It was done, and it was done, and it was done and done and done and done and done.
That's a really extreme because he's saying from now on, even though they had no base on being
Correct.
and no oil moed,
Right.
they brought a tomid every day.
The chiddush of the pasuk is not that they learned it and didn't do it. Exactly the opposite. They learned it and they did it and they kept doing it.
Not just the
Ho'asuya is like a gerund. It is being done.
That was just done, yeah.
Right. In other words, Olas Tamid Ho'asuya, that is from being done on Har Sinai, was always done
No, but they left Har Sinai, so
and kept doing it.
He seems to be implying, even though the pasuk is Bahar Sinai,
Right.
he's
No, it means they started then.
right.
They started and kept doing it. That's the drash of Rabbi Kiva. Right, which means Rabbi Kiva is going to say which type of carbon was it?
Well,
The Talmud, correct? Which is in line with the same Rabbi Kiva that we had at the top of the page. That Rabbi Kiva argued Rabbi Shmuel, right? Which is going to be the opinion of Rabbi Kiva that he holds it's going to be Olas Tamid.
Yeah, for sure.
So he's consistent. Okay?
Absolutely.
But what he's saying is, even after the Torah was given, you could do this alatami all the time.
Not you could. They had to. They had to, even though they didn't have a base, even though they didn't have a karbanos, even though they didn't have a mishkan, even though they didn't have anything. They had a mizbeach. They built a mizbeach.
No, but the Mizbeach staying at Har Sinai.
Whatever mizbeach they had, so they built another mizbeach.
Every time they camped, they built that other Mizbeach.
No one was there. We don't know what happens. remember, right? It's not forever and a day. They eventually do put up a mishkan.
Yes,
And when they have a mishkan, I know Vayikra is like a whole sefer away. But when they get the mishkan, they start bringing karbanos.
But it's a,
Yep.
but it's a whole other.
Okay, so whatever. And now, and there's one question on the Rabbi Akiva opinion. It's a question taken from the book of Amos. Elamani Makayim. This is probably Rabbi Akiva speaking. How do I learn the pasuk, which almost rails against the people and God, almost speaking in the name of God? Hazvachim umincha higashtem li bamidbar arba'im shana Beis Yisrael. So in other words, did you bring for me zvachim and mincha for 40 years? It means like it's the Navi saying you didn't bring it. So how could you say that they started and they never ended? What do you mean they never stopped? Rabbi Akiva says there was never a day they didn't bring it. Nama seems to be saying, you Jewish people, left God already in the midbar from the early days. You didn't serve God by bringing karbanos. So what am I going to do with that, says Rabbi Akiva? I know it's a pasuk in Navi, but I got to deal with it theologically. So he says, Shifto shalevi shlo avdo avodah zara hein ikri v'osa. Okay, so who brought karbanos for the 40 years? The Shevet Levi. Okay, so now why couldn't Bnei Yisrael bring karbanos for 40 years?
Well, first of all, what do you mean by this?
They were coming.
Why they more Talmud than Levi?
And we're talking about.
What's the tumah?
Are we talking about the Olat Talmud, which is a communal thing,
Right,
isn't it?
correct.
So what's it got to do with one Shevet or another? I must say, it doesn't matter which Shevet. It wasn't Levi that brought it.
It was the Kohanim that brought it. That's Levium.
Yeah, so we know that they did.
So in other words,
So what did God expect?
No.
Other people to do?
Rabbi Akiva's question is specifically on his own opinion.
Right, I realize that.
That says once they started,
They didn't stop.
they kept doing it.
Right.
Almost seems to say that they were less than ideally faithful bringing karbanos. It looks like, almost is speaking to the Jewish people. He's giving a
I know,
Muslim.
but who in the Jewish people is going to bring it? It's only
So it looks like communally you didn't do it. In other words, it doesn't mean that Yosef didn't bring his carbon and Moshe. It means you guys didn't bring it. Which the carbon is that you guys? It's only one carbon meets the bill. The last Talmud.
So the nation didn't bring it, but the Levium brought it for.
So the answer is, Amos is not speaking about the entire nation. He's speaking to the Jewish people. You guys left God. Now let me explain to you what it means. You guys did not bring the karbanos, but Levium brought the karbanos. Now why did they not bring the karbanos? What could be so bad? When you say, well, they're not Levium, they're not Kohanim. But that's not what Amos is yelling about. Amos is saying you guys were separated from God. He's taking the Jewish people to task.
Right.
So it looks like the Jewish people are in Chayrim. It's not really Chayrim. It's Nezufim Lefnei Makom. The Almighty was angry with them for building the golden calf. The Bnei Levi are the ones who did not. So they're the pure ones. So that's how the Rishonim tried to explain. The Jewish people had to delegate the tribe of Levi or the Kohanim to do it. Now, Kadosh Baruch Hu delegates.
Right.
But the reality is, Kadosh Baruch Hu was delegating the Kohanim, who are tribe of Levi, because they didn't worship the golden calf. The Jewish people are under this shadow. They're under this cloud of the golden calf for the 40 years. And Amos is really saying, you guys never recovered. You left God with the golden calf, and you never really returned. The barrier was still there. Not just because you're not born a Levi, but because you sinned. And that's the whole paragraph of the whole chapter of Amos is talking about the Jewish people turning away from God. Absolutely. Amos is giving the people Musar. But I'm saying, but you can therefore reconcile the fact that the Jewish people had a separation between them and God, and therefore they couldn't bring the Karban Talmud, but Levim still could do so, and it never stopped bringing the Karban Talmud. And once they started, says Rabbi Akiva, they continued, never missed a day even before they built the Old Moed. Okay. And one aside, remember the golden calf incident happens before they build the Old Moed.
Absolutely.
Right? The way if, the Ramban explains, if you read Sefer Shmos, it's about building up from Tumah. Jack said Tumah before, but it's Tumah to, of course, the Kedusha. The Jewish people on the 49th level of Tumah in Mitzrayim, they come out and they begin rising higher until across the sea, and they see God, Vayaminu Hashem, until they get to Har Sinai. They reach a pinnacle. And then what happens when Moshe is up at Har Sinai? They crash. They build the golden calf and they crash down. And then they start a process again, and they build the Oel Moed. And when they build the Oel Moed again, they've recreated Har Sinai in this world, almost. So the Shekhinah comes down, the Anan HaKavod comes down the same way the Anan covered Har Sinai. So the whole book really has two hills: hill, crash, hill, up again, and ends on the high at the end of Parshas Pekudei.